And going into kind of the beginning of the 90s, I know, Jean, you are our national president from 1993 to 1995. The sorority continued to push forward with establishing ourselves as a professional organization. And I know that you had a lot of things that you did over your time as national president and during and before to get us into that point. Can you tell us about the fortitude and the type of accomplishments that you were able to achieve during your...
Sure. So I was on council for 6 years and culminating in national president 93, 95. So we left that 93 convention, obviously, with all the charges of a convention, all the ideas, all the projects to go back and design and put in place. But also looming on the horizon was our 50th anniversary. So in spring of 94, we kicked off all those activities. And I can talk about those if somebody wants me to, but I'm going to focus on all the other things that we were doing during that time, in addition to kicking off the 50th activities leading into the convention in Orlando in 95. So probably the biggest thing in 93 was, after 4 years of talking about having a CFR for TBSigma, we left that convention with the I guess I would call it approval of the students to put that position into place. Immediately did interviews, Karen and others, and selected Kimberly Trotter to be this organization's first CFR. It was an incredible add to the organization at the national level. She visited every chapter in the country in 2 years, spent her life on the road, and really helped us to understand not only what our chapters were doing and that, but more about what they were thinking, what they wanted to be doing, what they were yearning for, which then helped us to understand that developing more leadership opportunities was key to our future, and things like that. So meanwhile, we're coming out of the late 80s, early 90s. There were a lot of fiscal cuts for band programs. Some had rebounded somewhat. We had bands that were sponsored by brands as large as Nike in order to exist on college campuses. But we still needed a focus on music education. And so Debbie Baker, who was our PLO, Professional Liaison Officer, and Herschel Beasley from KK took on the role not only of NIB, czars, I would call them, but they spearheaded a music education task force. And they helped us to understand what we should be doing locally, not only as individuals, but as districts, as chapters, right? And the first thing was, be in your band. Support your band if you can't be in your band. And it sounds awfully simple, but it still even works today, right? Support bands in your community, support music in your community. And don't forget how your voice, by buying a ticket or sitting in a seat or listening online, resonates with those performers and with that program. So they led that program for those 2 years, and it really was impactful from a grassroots perspective. And it's something that I'm very proud of both of them for designing and seeing through to the end, and using their fortitude for band and music, and using that with our student members as well. So we also left 93 with updated policies regarding hazing and alcohol. And unfortunately, that was because there were some opportunities in the previous bienniums where we had to, stand up and do investigations and found out some things we didn't want to hear. And we had to suspend some chapters. We had to lose some chapters over some things that happened. So we left that convention with those new policies and really a renewed focus, as Karen said, about how do we want to be perceived, right? And so that was a big focus leading up to that convention, but also leaving that convention, and ensuring that we all knew what we needed to do, and we all clearly knew what we shouldn't be doing, and that we used our fortitude to say to members who maybe weren't quite doing what they should be doing, hey, don't do that. right? You're in letters. And it really did come down to that all the way through all levels of TBS, from our active members, through districts, through national, through alumni. And we just kind of had to take a minute and look inward and say, why are we doing these things? Is it because they've always been done, because they were done to you? And is it appropriate? So that was part of that, that time as well. I think that the next couple of things that happened in 91, a little bit before me, but carried on through my time as president, was the purchase of the national headquarters, the station, and also the donation of the Duck Street property. And so with the headquarters, we were so excited to have our own home and to get out of that one little office in OSU that we had had for so long and adored, but had purely outgrown 20 years earlier, but just stayed there because the deal was good, right? We bought the station and moved into it with vim and vigor, and then stood there and looked around and went, wow, we got some work to do here. It needed a lot of work. It needed carpet, just basic things. It needed windows, it needed doors, it needed a roof, for heaven's sakes, to protect it. It was a historical building and the roof was in very poor shape. So we created a program called Project SOS, Save Our Station, which was used for many years. And it was a donation program that we asked, alumni and everyone to work towards donating money to at every level to help us to pay for these things that needed to be done. And it also helped Duck Street in later years because Duck Street then needed a roof. So we used some of those funds to re-roof Duck Street as well. It is also the time of the Get Laid campaign, which was the BRIC program that we're all so very familiar with now outside of the headquarters, the station, and Get Laid in Stillwater, I think was the theme. Correct me if I'm wrong, Karen or Lisa. Yeah, so that obviously caught some attention and was the beginning of the BRIC program that we all know and love today. In December of 94, during my biennium, the executive director at the time, David Solomon, chose to resign his position after 10 years with the organizations and enjoy retirement. And so an executive director search was started with the national convention and the 50th anniversary coming up in 6 months in July of 95. We did sort of drag our feet a little bit intentionally, and our national headquarters administrator took on the role of the convention coordinator and really helped us out there, because that had been historically at that point the role of the ED. But Gwen stepped in and helped us through that convention and really organized and did everything that needed to be done for us. And then the search really started for an ED with job postings and such after the convention. And there was a group of council and board members who did those interviews. And by February of 96, I believe, Alan Bonner had been offered that position and joined us shortly thereafter in Stillwater. So that was all happening during that time. Also during that biennium, the Joint National Alumni Task Force was formed. Debbie Kaplan and Scott Stoll led that charge, and we were really trying to figure out what the role of our alumni would be going forward. I think there might have been 11 or 12 alumni associations back in that time, and they were still coming to conventions and sitting in the back rows and having votes and all those things. And I think we were all at the point where we were questioning what is their role going forward. So Debbie and Scott spearheaded the effort. And if I'm right, I think there were 12 original members of that task force, and they met over the phone primarily until about a year into their discussions. They realized they needed to meet in person to get real action taken. So they all traveled to Chicago. They met in person for a weekend and made a lot of progress. And coming out of that meeting, they approached the national councils and they said, in 95, can we hold alumni activities and sponsor alumni activities, both social and business, outside of the joint meetings and the separate meetings of the active membership? And that had never been done. And we, of course, said yes. And they sponsored barbecues and pool parties and all kinds of activities. But they also had their own meetings. By the time National Convention finished in 95, they proposed to the organization a joint National Alumni Association, NAA. And that group who had been on the task force, most of them were not at convention. They were still participating via phone, but they were not at convention, had professional obligations, family obligations. So coming out of 95, there was a steering committee of, I think, 4 people who took that NAA template and started to move that forward and down the road through all the transitions that we've had since 1995. So it was an exciting time for alumni because we were defining their role, they're defining their involvement, right? And their responsibilities as well. And so that was another thing that was happening during that time. And then, of course, as I said earlier, all the while we're planning our 50th. We kicked that off in March of 94 with some boxes at district conventions, and Karen and Debbie worked so hard on those and just really kicked off a year of activities leading up to that convention in 95 in Orlando.
Nice. A lot. I think sometimes it's like, I forget how much you can get done in 2 years. And I often think I don't have enough time to get the things done in 2 years, but you all did a lot. And I feel like, as we've even seen over, between 46 and early 90s, that every decade has really brought forth like huge jolts of updates and changes and modernization and professionalism for the organization. And you really kicked off the 90s getting us there. So thank you. And you definitely started kind of talking in a little bit about the beginning of the National Alumni Association for Kappa Kappa Psi and Tau Beta Sigma. And I wanted to take this moment and kind of segue into talking about the, how Tau Beta Sigma's Alumni Association, and a little bit the story about the transition between a joint one to a only Tau Beta Sigma and only KK Psi one from then. So Chris, as our chairperson for the Alumni Association, tell us all the things.
Well, I mean, I've picked up tidbits over the years, but I can definitely talk about some things because, like I mentioned earlier, it's really important to understand the context of the time where, you went to college, you were in band, you may have done Kappa Kappa Psi or Tau Beta Sigma, depending on your gender expression. And then that period was done and you went off into the real world. And this was a nice, chapter in your personal history. But without the lack of ease of communication, like to stay in touch with your sisters from college, you had to write letters or pay for each individual long distance phone call to talk to them. Alumni organizing, I can tell you, having been a kid in that time, like trying to stay in touch with even family outside of your local telephone area, it was expensive and you had to be judicious. And so the concept of having an organized alumni effort for a college fraternity and or sorority just wasn't, a priority. I can tell you that for certain. A lot of times your alumni interaction would happen when you went to your football games, most particularly homecoming, to see all of your friends from chapter days. And that's how a lot of our, how do I describe it? A lot of we call them LAAs now. You can call them, just local alumni groups get started. You would go to band alumni day and you're like, let's start a thing. Let's, raise some money to help our band. But like I said, the communication was not there. And so as we get out of the 80s and into the 90s, that's when, things like the internet started to happen and people had, sufficient of their time and energies to devote to things that they hold dear. And so I could definitely understand. I mean, I was still in high school in the period Jean was talking about, but, understanding like we could do something too. We could get together, we could, create this alumni experience. And, because we always say, you're a sister for life. Being a sister doesn't end at graduation, but being an active member of the sorority does. And there's the rub, making sure you know what your lane is and figuring out how to stay in it. And these are things we're still talking about today in 2020. I know Siobhan's taking us through this historical drive through, 1940s to today. So I'll save a little conversation about the TBSAA after 2007. But, when I think about that time, it's all about having the capacity to organize and have a purpose. The purpose of the sorority is to serve college bands. And after you graduate, that purpose ends. So the question of how do we involve our formerly active members, because we're all alumni, but formerly active members in a way that's appropriate and has a purpose. And that is a conversation that they started around the time of Jean's presidency, and we're still having it today. It's constantly evolving. So, I'll get into it a little bit more later on in the conversation, but for those of you who are relatively young and don't have historical context, it just wasn't something that people talked about unless you wanted to be a volunteer, i.e. a counselor or an officer. There was no role for you. Your role was to support your college band as an alumni of your school. And I think part of a good reason is something Jean mentioned also, which was as alumni, we are an economic powerhouse. Because we have jobs now. And some of us are lucky enough to have expendable income. And so things like, as Jean mentioned, Project SOS and laying bricks, really, I'm certain, again, I was like a junior in high school, but whatever, really opened the door to, there's a way we can utilize these people who care and have the capacity to give other than a specific project one at a time. But that's my spoiler alert for the late 2000s. So I'll let Siobhan get back to her travels.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think we started to see some LAAs, local alumni associations, kind of beginning in the late 60s, 70s. I think was it Beta Gamma UT was one of the first LAAs that we had in the country. And it's crazy that we had to wait 10, 20 years until we had two people who had the courage and the fortitude to take on the task of trying to give our alumni a purpose, a continued purpose in Tau Beta Sigma. And I'm glad that, they laid that foundation. And we'll, again, like Chris said, we'll talk a little bit more about current TBSA and the fortitude that we've had over the past 10-ish years within having 13 years over teenagers this year. I love it. And so in the middle of, or kind of the closing part of the 90s, in 1997, was when Tau Beta Sigma developed our mission statement. And I'll read the mission statement for you all, just a refresher, to provide exceptional service to collegiate bands and promote equality and diversity, including empowering women in the band profession. We cultivate leadership, educational achievement, music appreciation, and community development. And in 1997, our mission statement, I think we've been existing for so long, it gave us an opportunity to like kind of focus in on what we need to do. And I believe in 1997, we actually had our first Women in Music speaker happening at our national convention. And then from then, that was laying the first foundation of us, living our mission, empowering women in the music profession. And then we
can I just make one correction, because the mission statement you have on the screen that you just read is actually the one that was developed in 2009. So it's a little bit different, especially when it comes to the part about diversity and equality was not included in the initial mission statement. So I just wanted to point that out, that the mission statement from 1997 was different. And this one was made in 2009 when we did strategic planning and came up with a new mission, because we felt like it needed to be changed to fit what the organization was doing and what we were looking forward to in the past. Because we said, the initial mission statement really focused on women in music, but because of the change in dynamics of our membership, we wanted to make sure that we also talked about diversity and equality.
Thank you for correcting me on that. And go ahead, Karen, take away.
So just to the precursor for what Catherine just said was, that we were in a time where the fraternity was actually growing substantially faster than the sorority was. And a lot of that, and nobody say that Karen said, okay, but it was the fact that it was a lot of directors saying, if I have one, why do I need two? And you know, and it was just what it was. I mean, it was just what it was. And so what we were trying to do was to be able to say this is a reason. And even though we were co-ed and we had you know, a multitude of men in the group, you know, with us, it was still, who is Tau Beta Sigma? And going back to where we began, so the precursor to where it went to in 2009 was how to identify really a difference between Kappa Kappa Psi and between us. And that was the first time, yes, Sylvia, I see you, that we actually had strategic planning, and Colonel Alan Bonner helped lead us through that initial. I can remember being at the station, and the moment that we highlighted the women in music, it was like the big light bulb, and it was like I can remember like. It was really emotional because I think we were really struggling with how to still identify ourselves. So and so it was a really important moment. And so that was that moment that we started and that we were able to move forward. And then Catherine and her councils took that and moved it even one step further, which was so important. So I just thank you.
Yeah, and thank you both. And yeah, Sylvia Halberdier, she was our national president right after Karen, correct? She did put in the chat, 1997, we went through the strategic planning where that kind of began the first part of, or probably not the first strategic planning that we did, but a strategic planning, and then again in 2009. And so we're always tweaking and always making changes and pushing this forward. And I love what you said about, you know, really the mission statement focused us in on our purpose and differentiating us against, you know, other organizations as well. And then as we continue through the going into the later 90s, we get into Karen's term, 1999, bringing us into the new millennium. And we accomplished so much in the 1990s, and the sorority went through a lot of changes and, you know, growth. And there was a lot of opportunity for continued fortitude for us as well. I know that one thing that we had to push through was financial stability with the sorority. And as I think about this, you know, our financial stability from then to now, we've done a lot of work, and I know some of it started around, you know, beginning with your term, Karen. So how did the sorority persevere through this hardship to become a now more stable and responsible organization?
Well, you know, one of the big things that started back with Pat, like we were speaking about Patsy Hale earlier, was that in the mid 60s, we created an agreement with Kappa Kappa Psi that we would split all costs because it was important to the sorority to be able to stand equal. So as that continued, and as I just mentioned, there was that time where the fraternity began to become larger in members than the sorority was, but we still maintained that agreement, and it's still to this day. There were some lean years. Much going back and thinking about the purchase of Stillwater Station. And everything that, because being that it's a historical site on the United States Registry of Historical Sites, and because of that, we had to keep to certain. We just couldn't go and put, like, you know, a window in. It had to be approved. We had to have certain things, and all of that was very expensive, like Jean was saying. And between the two organizations, we took out a very sizable loan. That's where the SOS came in. And so we were still maintaining those expenses on top of our membership changing and the fraternity being a little larger and us really maintaining. We never lost membership. Probably one of the most, there's two things that there's a lot of things I'm really proud of, but in the summer of 2000, when we were at our summer meeting, I had the opportunity to tear up the loan documents because we had paid it off. And so you can see that took us 7 years. At the same time, it was the first time, and I believe like 3 or 4 bienniums that the sorority was in the black financially. And that was, it was only by a little bit, but we were in the black. And also at that point, we had the largest membership in the history of the sorority, someplace like 3,600 or something like that members. So there was a lot, and all the while maintaining our individual status of who we were, why we were there, and why we needed to be there. So making sure that there was, and all of that goes to the women, and I can say the women who came before me, and their fortitude and courage to be able to maintain that. I just wanted to say really quickly, if I could, going back to what Chris was talking about, the change of all of the change of the ritual and everything, is that the credit for that goes to past president Kathy Rotifer and her council. She literally, there was a former district counselor, Lenore Doff, who specialized in, Jean, can you, her specialization was English and English history and things like that. And she literally took our ritual and literally researched all the meanings so that we had a better understanding of that. And at the same time, changed the from being, yes, the wording from she, sister to what was appropriate at the time. So I just wanted to say that. I wanted to be able to put her name out there. So, but I think the importance of during that time was that we were standing on our own feet, and that we were being, we were strong in what we believed.
And I love it. I
would like to add to that. That's a lot where our board became really interactive, and as Catherine said, became professionals. And between Jean and Patsy and Debbie Kaplan being on that board and investing in our trust funds, and they moved our money into different money management, and started establishing different rules and policies and stuff on that board. So that's where the board actually turned within this biennium, or within this time period, to become that more professional, seeking out, different lawyers and accountants, and getting better advice and stronger advice, and really working with the councils on this unity of where our existence was and what our identity was. So thank you to you ladies as well.
Absolutely. And something else that happened at that 2000 summer council meeting, or maybe it was a winter council meeting, was the second time when the merger of Tau Beta Sigma and Kappa Kappa Psi came up. And with that, we've seen up until that point that, we've had a very interesting relationship with the brothers over our time. And really, and one constant that we've had over the past 74 years has been serving alongside Kappa Kappa Psi on college campuses and on the national level and in a professional sphere as well. Good relationships take work. And what type of fortitude did we have, and that we currently have to continue to serve alongside our brothers? And Adrian, I'll let you speak to that as our current national president.
Sure. So we have had our fair share of ups and downs, and that is how relationships work, right, friends? That's the nature of human interaction and the nature of a familial relationship that I think that we have with Kappa Kappa Psi. We are brothers and sisters in music, and sometimes we don't agree, and sometimes things are hard, very, very hard, but we are in a good spot now because of all of the work that has been done over the last several years to maintain that bond, to maintain that familial bond. And you're right, Siobhan, it takes work. And I'm sure that everyone on this panel who has worked alongside the brothers, everyone here has a counterpart or has had a counterpart in Kappa Kappa Psi in some way, shape, or form. And it requires all of the same things that our chapter relationships require, our relationships with even just our sisters. Constant communication, love and compassion, sometimes a lot of grace for yourself and for your counterpart. It takes compromise. It takes a lot of talking through things and seeing others' points of views and having them see your point of view and then coming to a consensus together, which is something that we are fortunate enough to have in our relationship with our brothers right now. And I know we've talked about throughout our history that it wasn't always necessarily like that. And so we have to constantly work at it. And my charge would be, yes, Lisa, a lot of trust. My charge to our chapter members who are present here today is to take all of those things and work with your brothers or work with your other sisters or work with your other music organizations in much of the same way, because it's not easy, but it is a worthwhile relationship. I don't know of any other Greek organizations out there that have a relationship like we do with our brothers in Kappa Kappa Psi. And it's fairly impressive that we've made it 74 years and maintained that relationship. I think that is something to be proud of. So we have to do our part to make sure that we continue to have that with them in the future.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have anything they want to say on that?
I think along with what Lisa said, with trust is honesty. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we have not, and like I said, no sugarcoating. We have not always had the relationship where we could be completely honest with the brothers or our counterparts or whomever. And so I know I serve with Adrian right now, and to know that at all levels of the sorority, we have that relationship today where I can go to my counterpart and she go to her counterpart and say, I need to be honest, X, Y, Z, let's figure it out. I feel very blessed. And I'm very happy that those of you who came before us that I'm looking at on my screen helped us get there and work through it. But trust and honesty makes everything work, because then you can accept the things that are not the same and that you need to work on.
Absolutely. I think we're really fortunate to have members who have those memories and are able to help us to continue to not repeat the past over and over again with the relationships that we have with each other. So thank you. Somebody put in the chat, truthfulness and honest, which instills a sense of trust in others. Man, using those 8 and 5, it helps us to keep going forward. And speaking of forward, we're coming to the conclusion of our panel, but we still have a new millennium to quickly touch on. So Chris, I know we started to talk about the TBSAA or the NAA, and then the TBSigma Alumni Association celebrating its 13th year. Tell us about kind of the start of that and how it has been a fortitude-filled journey with lots of courage exhibited on the side.
Well, I'll gloss over the speed bumps along the way, but needless to say, the NAA was amazing at getting this whole concept of alumni organizing started and figuring out what is the role. Like, is there a reason for an alumni to get together with other alumni or go to a convention? Is there a reason for that? and really put a lot of work in. And between 2006 and 2007, decisions were made that, you know, structurally, legally, the one NAA needed to be two separate national organizations. And so, you know, my predecessors in the TBSAA got the work started heading into the 2007 National Convention. And I am, you know, I go back and I read some of the documentation I have, and I'm super impressed with the work they did. But when I think about, you know, what we're working towards today, 13 years after 2007, and how we got here, and I think of Fortitude, I think it's a level of trying to figure out how to focus that energy. If you think of a prism, light hits a prism and it becomes, you know, this rainbow of color. We're trying to be a reverse prism. We've got all these wonderful people with their energies and interests, and we're trying to help focus it back out into one concerted alumni effort, you know. But the biggest thing I can tell you is what we're working towards as an organization that's continuing to grow every year, very excited, I know you've all seen the social media posts, is creating a unique and interesting and valuable and purposeful alumni experience that is not tied directly into involvement in serving college bands, because we have a whole 100 some odd chapters who are holding that down, and they're doing it really well in 2020, which I know Adrian will likely want to talk about in a little bit. But, you know, I'm really proud of the work we're doing at helping alumni coming together. You know, you move across the country after college, helping you find people in your area that you can get to know, so that you have that family when you show up at your new apartment at age 23 and you're like, well, this is a new city. We're here to support you as you're in your professional development with grants and scholarships to grad school. But the biggest thing is, you know, it's sort of like, you know, the metamorphosis from caterpillar to butterfly. Like you're a different creature, but you're the same. And so we're trying really hard, and we've had to have hard conversations about what is the role, what is our overriding purpose, and sort of like and to become what today I can say as the organization's, you know, nominal head for these 2 years, is to prove to the rest of the sorority, the active side, the, you know, our life members and past national presidents, that we are a valuable organization, that we are holding our own, that we can be a force for good with philanthropy and continued support of our active chapters and the trust fund and everything else. You know, and so, you know, it's been a journey to get to the point where we can say that our alumni leaders and our alumni volunteers, such as counselors and officers and board members, you know, we're making a significant contribution that I really feel enhances the life of our active members and our active chapters, which are our lifeblood, and our alumni members who, you know, I just, you know, I mean, I'm in the last year of my early 40s. I had to learn that this week, you know, but you know, if you look over my shoulder, there it is. I've still got my shingles up, because this is a valuable portion of my life. And so, you know, working on this organization to try to find methods to help get people together to continue that enrichment, but in a different way. And, you know, to get to this point 13 years in, where we as the alumni board are a valued component of our national leadership, that we can provide our alumni members of the sorority other avenues for volunteerism and leadership potential. I'm super excited. It has taken a lot of fortitude. I'm not going to go down the rest of the bullet list, but, you know, and, you know, and again, when we get to 2020, I'm going to let Adrian carry the water on that conversation, but it's been interesting. It's been a lot of hard work. And I think I see a lot of names in this chat of people who I know are current members. And I thank you very much for your contributions. You know, whether or not you feel that we are touching your day-to-day life, you are touching ours, thanks to your dedication and and I'm going to say it because it's real, economic impact on both the sorority and the Alumni Association. So that's kind of like my soapbox speech I've been building up in the back of my head. So, from 2007, when it was said, we're not going to have an NAA anymore, TBS is on its own and needs to come with an organization for an alumni group and figure out its purpose. It's been a long road, but it's been a very enriching and valuable road, and I'm glad it's still going.
I love it. And, 2007, with y'all had to go through a lot of, courage, of course, I keep going back to courage, doing something that terrifies you and using your fortitude to bring you to where you are today. Again, a common theme in TBSigma, taking whatever the ideal is and running with it and building something that's going to enrich the organization and our members as a whole. And then also around that time, it also kind of mirrors like the national organization, where we have our mission statement, which is focusing in on what we want to do. And the NAA, TBSAA switch did that as well, focusing in on giving our alumni a place to go. And I said focus, and I feel silly. Well, not silly. This is what I am as a VPSP. We also started the Scouting for Music in 2007, continuing to use our mission to serve our community and helping TBSigma to further differentiate ourselves against other organizations and give our members another outlet to serve. We, at that time also, I believe in 2007, we had to do away with the CFR role, but it came back almost less than 10 years later. Actually, when Catherine Kelly, you were our national president, brought back the CVA program, went back out there to really get to see our students again and help them and help our counselors as well, who are trying to serve all of their chapters at once. Tell us about your time as national president, because you also started the CVA program and went into leading the sorority as we go into 2017, and was also our first national president who graduated from an HBCU. I know that holds a lot of weight in itself. So I'm going to give the floor to you and kind of tell us your story. We're here to listen to your story.
I feel like Jean's story was so much better than what I'm about to say, because hers, I feel like she got so much stuff done. I'm a little jealous. I didn't write down the stuff, but I definitely know it wasn't as extensive a list. But I want to touch on a couple things, because I think in talking about fortitude, and I don't say these things to be like, oh, woe is me, but I think what I've come to realize in 2020 is that by not talking about some of these things, I may have done a disservice, because some people don't feel like, I don't want to say that they were represented, but that they may not have known the struggle and how the things that they may have said or done were perceived by someone coming into that role. And I think the biggest challenge for me as the first is the stereotypes. I think, in the Northeast District, as a student, I think Howard has a air of confidence, and we have Morgan, and Morgan always had leadership. So I never felt restricted, and as a Black woman, as a member of HBCU, that I couldn't do something in the organization, that I couldn't be in leadership on the district level. I think the different constraints I felt was not until I got to the national level. And some of it was stereotypes on both sides, like things that I had come into being from an HBCU. Most HBCUs are single sex. So I came into a situation where I was, confident in being a woman in the organization. I didn't feel, and there was a lot of back and forth at the time about women being in Kappa Kappa Psi, and especially at HBCUs. As a Black woman, we felt, and I had the question asked me if I knew I could join Kappa Kappa Psi, would I have? And for me, from a cultural standpoint, looking at the Divine Nine and the Deltas and the AKAs and Sigma and Rho and those kind of things, I never felt that it was a problem to want to be in an organization that was just women, and feeling that there was any inequality in doing so and being a part of that. And so I had to take a step back in my own belief system, in my own self, to also see that the way of an HBCU is not the only way. And if I was going to be the president for every chapter, then I also had to be fair and appreciating everyone's point of view, and not just the way that I saw things, And then on the flip side, the stereotypes that were put upon me, that I feel like we have to get past. And you know, one of the things I remember is always being the national leadership representative that was asked to do Sisterhood and Spirit. And people who know me know that I cannot step. Like, I play step and I have a little bit of rhythm, but that's not my ministry. So stereotypically being put into a situation where you're asked to do things that people see as traditionally part of the HBCU culture, I felt was restrictive and kind of put me in a box. You know, I think you also get put under a certain amount of stress by being the first or being the only, and to whether you're doing enough to support the missions of these different organizations. And we had this most recently, the discussion about small chapters. When I came into Howard's chapter, there was 3 members. There was 5 of us. We came in and we grew from there. But then it's been ebbs and flows in different kind of organizations. But you have to have an appreciation of that. Yes, at a HBCU this works, but at other chapters there's 40, 50 members, and that doesn't make one better or worse. It's just different. And me having to step outside of that, and also trying to get people to understand that role. And I think within that conversation, having to have conversations where I was called racially sensitive, and that being that voice at the table wasn't always easy, because you may have to kind of correct people in a way, and you also don't want to come across as the angry Black woman, because then that stereotype and that stigma sticks with you and causes other issues down the line. And when people don't get to know you as the person that you are, and just as the caricature that's painted of you, then it becomes an issue. So I feel like that was a part of what I had to do as the first, is to get outside of that caricature and also educate people on both sides, but not feel like I had to speak for all HBCUs, because all of us are very different. Just like every university has its own culture and flavor, so do we. And recognizing the things that we can add to the conversation. And I also think the other thing that I've learned is that just because we're from an HBCU, we can't negate the experiences of other Black and brown members that are from other chapters, and help them in celebrating their Blackness, because it's hard to celebrate that within those things. Being in the HBCU, I can tell you, and going to Howard, there's a certain freedom that comes from, there's not the pressure of being Black when you're at a school where everybody's Black. You see people who come before you and who've been successful, and in your mind, you say, I can do that because they're doing that. And I hope that's the legacy that I've been able to give to people, is that you can do this. This is a part of what you can do, and you can be in these roles because you see it. And I think, you know, what's came after me is Jonathan being the first male president. Erica, I know you don't want me to say this, but you coming up and having it where we seeing more diversity in the people that we're bringing in, and hopefully people also seeing the diversity in what we've gone through will help them to see that there's something on the other side. Because I mean, I came into the National Council as an internal medicine resident with a newborn, you know, like it wasn't an easy transition, and you feel sometimes that you're not enough, and I think some people whisper in your ear that you're not enough, but you got to have that fortitude in yourself and believe in, and finding those people that are a positive voice. And I'm going to publicly say Karen Hammond has always been a positive voice for me. Kathy Miles. I mean, there's so many people that have told me that I can do this, even when I felt that I couldn't do it myself. Crystal Wright. I mean, the list goes on and on. And just as we come to the Black Lives Matter movement and the different things that are going on right now, we need those allies. We need those people that are willing to support us, no matter who we are, what we come from, and get to know us as the people we are, and not a caricature or a stereotype that's put out in the public view. And I think for TBS as a whole, that's something we deal with as being women. You know, TBS is for girls, TBS is for this. No, TBS is much more than that. It's bigger than just our gender. It's bigger than just, you know, our belief system. We're talking about a sisterhood and a service that transcends those things. And I think we all, in that work that we have to do, have to really focus on that and bring those positive voices to the table. And those of us that may have felt ostracized or may have felt denied certain things, also come with an open heart to have a discussion. And you know, we talking about now about forgiveness and about letting things go. Let's hold ourselves to our ritualistic vows. Let's hold ourselves to what we want TBS to be, and really make those changes and mean those changes. And then we can, once we kind of, you know, something we're going to say is about proof, but then we can move forward because we're doing it. We're actively making those changes and actively being in a better place. And in terms of the legacy for my presidency too, this new CF, we call it CVAs now, chapter visitation assistants, was really important. And I think the councils after mine have continued to grow it and to transform it into what the organization needs. The ritual workbook, that was something that Lisa started, and we kind of took the bag on and kept going, and it's been refined and changed, and hopefully that'll be something that stays with the organization long term. And other things that we were able to accomplish during that time, you know, I hope that legacy is that it may not be the form that it was when we started, but that it helps to grow the organization and put us into a better place, and that the contributions I've had will also grow the organization and grow people's spirits and grow their motivation and grow their willingness to serve in this capacity, and their love of music overall.
Yes, I got a lot of things from you just now, Catherine, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but it's always hard being the first person in your, you know, the first. And I think you did a fantastic job just holding your head high and using that fortitude and courage and all the rest of the 8 and 5 to continue to lead the organization, where you could have just left. You can be like, I'm not taking this, I'm leaving. But you know, we appreciate your fortitude, and you have inspired other, you know, members of the national leadership team and even our members to go out and do great things. This past April, we were in a workshop for DC Alcoda, and one of the counselors, she was serving as the advisor for one of our colonies, and this colony is at a predominantly Black university, and they did the org chart, and you know, the sorority has become more diverse over the years, and you know, they saw a snapshot of all of our leaders now, and you know, it's heartwarming, and I even get a little goosebumps even knowing that like our people who are interested in joining our organization see themselves represented, and they're inspired to, you know, be part of this organization and hopefully continue to serve with us for the long haul. And I know that you've put through a lot, all of us has been through a lot of fortitude and had to use the fortitude and courage, and especially in 2020, courage and fortitude and has been kind of the thing that we've been we have been focusing on this year. And I think there's been a number of things that have happened in the world and in the sorority this year alone. And Adrian, how has fortitude and courage really helped you to lead the sorority through pandemics and calls for action and everything so far this year?
Well, first of all, I'm not alone. There is an amazing team of national leadership behind me, beside me, in front of me. Everyone who spoke today, everyone who came before me as national president, everyone who came before Carolyn as TBS chair of the board, everyone who has had a leadership role in this organization set us up to make it through this year/biennium, 4 years of March, as we like to call it. We would not have been able to make it through had the foundations not been led. And I think that we continually, as a national council, as a national leadership team, fall back on our mission, number one. We always try to remind each other of the 8 and 5, and are we doing the things that we need to be doing? What do we need to do to talk to our students about our mission and our 8 and 5? How do we continue to move forward one step at a time through all of this? And I think that yeah, a lot has happened and a lot is yet to come. We're not through it yet. We're living history still. We're not there. And so I just think that surrounding ourselves with a, as Catherine said, with people who advocate for you, who always lift you up, who can tell you do that, you can do it and you can make it. And doing that for other people, I think all of our national leadership team members really have tried to be that person for someone else too, because we're all kind of relying on each other, and we know that our students are relying on each other and on us. And it's, again, to go back to it, we're family and we want to take care of each other. We want to lift each other up. We want to do everything we possibly can right now to help each other. And it's not been easy. I'm sure chapter members listening to this understand that every single chapter is doing something a little bit different this year, because their band program is doing something different, because their university is doing something different, because their home life is different, because their work life is different. Everything is just so up in the air, that we want to make sure that first and foremost we're trying to hold each other up and hold each other together and hold our band programs up and hold our band programs together, because that's our first and foremost mission, right? To serve our bands and to make sure that our bands can continue past the pandemic. So we could go into so many details, Siobhan, and we are, I know, already long on time, but I think knowing that we are surrounded by great people, knowing that people have gone through hard times before us. I mean, everyone spoke to all of the hardships in TBSigma that have come before. Nothing is insurmountable when you look at all of those things and know that we made it through all of those things intact. We just have to do the next right thing and take one step forward and keep track of each other, take care of each other.
Absolutely. It brings me back to, that common theme when things go crazy in the world is to lean on our values, and our values connect us to other people who have our back and who are there to support us. And that's I think, seeing our chapters and the creativity that they've exhibited this year, how to do recruitment differently and how to do chapter operations differently, and how they've stepped up for their bands now. I think it's tough on all of us, emotionally and physically and, all the other things. But I think having that common tie and the people that are around you that are supporting you is something that has really kept us at Fortitude to, if anything, support each other is what's, helping us to lead through this year. And so thank you, Adrian. And we are actually on our last couple of minutes of time here in this panel. Actually went a little bit over, but thank you all for your contribution to the conversation. I wanted to leave everyone with one last thing. We're coming into our 75th anniversary this coming March, and where do you actually see, I want to hear from our panelists in one word, where you think you see TBSigma, or where you would love to see TBSigma be in the next 10 or 25 years.
Only one word?
Okay.
Here.
Thriving.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Thriving.
Yes.
Thriving.
Strong.
Mm-hmm.
Relevant.
Good word.
My favorite color is green, and so I'm like growth on all
That's what I was going to say. Growth on all levels in everything. Better, right? We always want to be better than before.